Hello, this is Ashley Pettit, and I'm here to discuss with you all about the leader-member exchange theory and how that relates to change in an organization and how that relates to leadership in an organization. With leader exchange theory, leader-member exchange theory, otherwise known as LMX, this acronym here, it is pretty much all about an in-group and an out-group. As far as a leader goes, you're going to have two different groups as far as your communication. And with this, it's pretty much saying that leaders communicate differently with those in an in-group and with those in an out-group. And as you probably can see, if you guys consider your own personal leadership teams, wherever it may be on campus or in the world and stuff, but you notice that leaders have an in-group, and these are the ones that get communicated with immediately. And they have a greater responsibility, they have more rewards and attention from their leader and supervisor. And with that, since they are so close, they might get some latitude in their roles. And the bottom line is they work within their leader's inner circle of communication. When you consider an out-group member, it's the exact opposite, completely exact opposite. And that just means that this member works outside the leader's inner circle of communication. So they're kind of left on their own to do their own work, and it shouldn't always be considered a negative thing to be in the out-group. It just means the leader thinks that you could work better on your own. But these out-group members are more regulated by formal rules and policies rather than a personal relationship to their leader and supervisor. But this theory is all about how these relationships can administer how worker satisfaction goes in a leadership situation. So as a leader, you're dealing with these two teams, and you kind of wonder, okay, how am I going to lead them well? And it kind of talks about the leader's role versus the follower's role. And the leader is the middleman to every situation in the system, whether it be in the in-group or the out-group. They're the pick point for whom talks to whoever. And the follower's role is to get their job done and to listen to their leader and understand that. And as the implications with change come around with this theory, it's really simple to see the comparisons between Kotter's model of change and this theory, because this theory is all about how member satisfaction will increase when they have a sense of connection with their leader. And I believe that goes to show you with change as well. Leaders try and implement change the best of their ability. And when you have an in-group and an out-group, you're dealing with two separate teams here. So you have to really, really know your teams. And they have to know and trust you as you're implementing change. And they have to realize that you are doing it for their best interest, but you're also going to communicate with them well. And we'll get into that a little bit, but that's the biggest thing this theory kind of focuses on. And it tells you more of how they work within their in-groups and out-groups to get stuff done as far as their leadership role goes. And it helps develop contrasting relationships, which can be good in any organization because you all don't want to be the exact same or nothing will get done. But this is just a quick summary of the theory, and as we apply it to change in a second, you'll see how it's easily applicable. Dealing with part one summary, which would be how we're going to apply this theory of leadership to organizational leadership as far as an organization goes. It kind of deals with which frame fits best. And this goes back to Bowman and Deal as we've read all session. And I believe that this LMX theory, leader-member exchange theory, fits best with the human resource frame. And I chose this and I kind of saw the parallels there because the human resource frame deals with interpersonal dynamics. And as I just explained to you how communication is the biggest part of this theory, that deals directly with interpersonal communication and the dynamics that come along with that. And a part of that would be informal roles. This is something, Bowman and Deal explain, and on page 175, it just kind of explains how each member of every frame and every group will have roles. For LMX, the in-group and the out-group have different roles. And that's something a leader will need to keep in mind as they're leading their teams, especially in this theory, but also just in general, in leadership anywhere, you need to be aware of your team and the roles that everyone is playing. And if they're aware of their role, if they know their expectation, if they know what they're supposed to be doing. But another thing that this frame kind of deals with would be just groups and teams in general. And that was my pick point as far as this frame went, because as you look at the theory and you see the two different groups and then the one leader, you notice that it's easy to put them in groups and teams like I've mentioned, and that's a good way to think of them. But Bowman and Deal kind of explain as a human resource principle would be to you need to hire the right people, obviously, and that's something the leader will do in this theory. They're going to assess your skills as you're implemented, or as you're in their team. You're going to see that your boss or your leader will kind of ask what your skills are, see what they are, and then place you where you need to be. But then in order to keep them, your leader's going to invest in you. And this is straight out of Bowman and Deal, as they are talking of the basic human resource strategies. And it kind of aligns right with this theory, because it's just kind of saying you hire the right people, you keep them, and that's by protecting their jobs and rewarding them well, and you promote from within, but then you also invest in them. And this is something I see that directly connects this theory and this frame, because as a leader in the LMX theory, you are constantly investing in your people and your members and your subordinates, because you want them to work the best that they can. And whether it's for you or like with you as a team, that's something you definitely want to look into. But also, Bowman and Deal say you need to empower them and promote diversity. And promote diversity is something kind of interesting in this theory with this frame, because diversity can mean a lot of different things, especially in all these different areas. But in this case, I believe it means to say you want to promote differences, whether it be in ideas or, you want to make sure that everybody's held accountable for their differences in their roles. And this theory kind of helps with that. But as you're empowering them as a leader, you can kind of see how this human resource frame fits with this theory, because it just kind of fits well in that. And it kind of shows you that your members are doing the best that they can, and in order for them to continue to do the best that they can, you need to be the best leader you can be. And this is what the research kind of showed me, and it showed me that this frame with its interpersonal dynamics and communication and all of this will help fit into the human resource strategies, because they're very similar. To continue on with the part 1 summary, just really quick, I'll just continue to explain how this theory of leadership will fit into this frame if you're in an actual practical leadership example. So say you find yourself in student affairs one day, or you see yourself in a small committee or a small group, and you can see that something needs to happen as far as your leadership goes. And if you choose this theory, what you're going to do in this human resource frame is you're going to pick groups. Like I've already explained to you all, that as a leader, you're going to have to assess your team and put people where they need to go. But you're going to pick groups, and then you're going to build them. You're going to build them up with communication and trust. And these are something that we've spoken about much. And it's just because it's important. You need to make sure you're building a team with a proper foundation. And a real life example, as I'm kind of building for you here, would be committees. In higher education, committees happen all the time. And this is something that you need to be aware of, because certain committees will last longer. Certain committees are just ad hoc. You know what I mean? They come and they go. But in regard to that, though, this frame of human resource and this theory of leadership for leader-member exchange, they play well together, especially in the real-life example of committees. Because if you're a committee leader, you're going to build your committee. You're going to effectively use communication to build that trust, so that you can get the most work done that you guys can, whether someone's in the in-group of the committee or the out-group. Regardless, the end goal is success and effectiveness. And if you guys are both groups are all working toward that with your leader's direction, you're on the right path. For part 2 summary of this theory in the change process, it's pretty simple. What I did was I compared Kotter's model of change in those 8 steps to this theory. And the 2 steps that I found worked best with this theory were step 3 and 4. Step 3 is to create a vision, and step 4 is to communicate this vision. Now, back to step 3, I will say that this LMX theory, the leader-member exchange, deals well with this mostly because of the in-group. Now, when a leader is creating visions and they're creating a purpose and strategies that are going to implement change, they're going to need some feedback. And this feedback will probably come from your in-group, which is good, because you pick these people, you know that they're going to work well with you, you respect their opinion. So that's awesome. But what happens now is that once you create your vision, now you need to communicate it. And as a leader, you have to realize that you have an in-group and an out-group. You can't just keep it to the in-group. Therefore, communicating the vision is a lot easier with this theory, because you have more people to communicate with you and for you. So as a leader, you're going to communicate to your out-group, who will communicate with each other. And the in-group will probably already know a tidbit of what's happening. So then you're going to reiterate or establish what's actually happening in your vision, and they will be able to communicate on your behalf. And these are 2 of the strengths that I found that this model could use in the steps, because part of change in general, let's look big picture here, you need to make sure everybody knows what's happening when change is happening. And a strength of this theory in the model itself is that it's going to help you communicate, and that's one of the foundational steps of any change. And continuing with strength, the strengths of this theory in the change process, as I just kind of mentioned, is communication. Bottom line, communication, you cannot change anything without communicating it to somebody, whether it's your team, yourself, or your supervisor. Something has to happen, and in order for something to happen smoothly, communication needs to go well. So that's one of the biggest strengths that I found through the research, through the readings, through the articles, through all of it, of this process and this theory. But on the flip side, let's talk about weaknesses. And I put communication as a weakness for this theory as well, because as you guys know now, the in-group and the out-group, you're probably wondering how the out-group feels when they're not told information. And that's exactly why communication is a weakness, because it has a possibility to pull people apart. And if somebody isn't told something right away, they might get slighted. And this could hurt your overall team satisfaction, because as a leader, if you're not telling everybody everything, they're going to wonder why. And that's something that it's okay to not tell everybody every single detail. One, because they're not authorized to know it. And two, it's going to take too long, and you don't need that. As a leader, you have to make decisions, and you might just need 5 people, not 15, telling you what their opinion is. So understand that this could also be a weakness. They're the flip side of the same coin here. Communication can be the driving force of this theory and change, but it can also pull them apart if the leader does not take time to establish the roles, like I've already mentioned, and get everybody on board. But also another weakness is there's a lack of direction in building teams. And when you look at all the research from like T.J. Hunt and Lunenburg and Bowman and Deal even, who they might talk about building theories and such, but they tell you what it means to be an in-group and what it means to be an out-group. They tell you how this leader is going to interact with them, but they don't tell you how to build this positive environment within the theory, because this theory can work. You know, I've seen it in multiple research here of different systems that it works, which I can get into in a minute, but it just it doesn't tell you how to build it. It doesn't tell you, oh, this person should go in the in-group. And I think that's kind of a weakness to this theory in the change process, because if a leader isn't sure how to divide the teams per se, they're not going to know where someone fits best. So when change comes around, when the change process is in motion with the 8 steps, there might be some hiccups. And that's just something I realized in my research. And regardless of the weaknesses of this theory in the change process, communication still stands as the biggest strength. And that's something that I will hope you guys remember as you think about this theory one day, or don't, that's fine. But just know for this presentation, I'd like you guys to realize that communication is the biggest strength. And for LMX, the step 3 and step 4 are the biggest reasons why this fits into the human resource frame, but also Kotter's model of change. When you kind of consider how higher education leadership is going to use this theory in this model, in this frame, there just needs to be a word of caution given. And my biggest consideration I would give for any higher education leader would be to use caution with both groups. And I've kind of already hit on how there's weaknesses in this theory and weaknesses in this model and frame and all of that. I've kind of already explained it, but just to remember and remind you all to be careful with your out-group. Don't exclude them and try to keep it at a distance, because they're your team as well. Just remember that. And please know that with any theory, there are improvements to be made. And I already explained to you the weaknesses, so you can take those and see and consider them when you think of a higher education job and leadership there. You can understand how there are problems that could occur. But from my research, what I found different systems would be useful, this theory would be, is like healthcare. I read an article, a journal article from T.J. Hunt about healthcare and how he studied it, and he studied the psychological health of the healthcare members together as they worked as a team. And I studied an article written, and it was about K-12 education. And that was perfect, because no matter what these articles are about, it was very easy to compare them to a higher education system or committee or department or school. You know, you can see the comparisons there, and it's awesome because this theory is not just limited to one area. And that's something I hope you guys have realized throughout this presentation, is that it can be applied to change in any type of change, any change model. And the frame, the human resource frame, it plays very, very well with it, and I hope you guys have noticed. And thank you all for listening, and I hope you guys have a better understanding of the leader-member exchange theory. Thank you.